It is that time again, time for the Powerhouse Roundtable, where we take a closer, more analytical look at the week's top news stories.
At the Roundtable today, Doug Hanks, a reporter for the Miami Herald who covers Miami-Dade County government and politics. Jessica Fernandez of Miami Young Republicans and the youngest delegate to last summer's GOP convention, now a claim to fame, I suppose. And H.T. Smith, veteran Miami attorney, civil rights leader, and law professor at Florida International University. And a legal, legend, icon? What was that award?
Legal
legend. A lawyer.
Great. Good morning. Glad to have you come in. All right, Doug Hanks, you heard the mayor make his pitch for a bus rapid transit system rather than going forward with rail. I mean, does this have legs? Is this going to work?
You know, who else besides the mayor of Miami-Dade County at this point is advocating for anything other than rail? I mean, we really haven't heard anyone come up and say, hey, the mayor's got a point. What's the downside to what the mayor's proposing? So eventually he has to get the county commission and the MPO to vote for this plan.
Metropolitan Planning Organization, which looks at all these.
Which isn't even the MPO anymore, the TPO.
Yeah, Transportation Planning Organization.
That, you know, bus is now a pejorative. It's not a bus, it's not a bus. How important is the whole marketing and look of maybe it's not really a bus, or maybe it is, but it's different than a bus?
Yeah, well, first of all, transportation is clearly the #1 issue on the minds of the people of Miami-Dade County. I'm happy to see,
as well.
Well, we're talking about Miami-Dade right now, and I'm happy to see that there's a discussion and debate that's going to go on about taking action. I can tell you right now, the people in the Northwest Corridor were promised that they would be next in terms of the linking of the Metro Rail station.
When and
I teach at FIU.
How long ago was that promise?
That promise was made at the time they gave the votes, the very first time before 2002.
1982.
Yeah, I remember that. And so any plan that won't have a link in the Northwest Corridor is going to cause a tremendous problem with regard to the commissioners of District 1, 2, and 3. Now, I live in the Southwest section. I'm happy that this is being considered, but you know, you can call it what you want to call it. You might not call it a bus, but the mayor is going to have to convince everybody that this is not the same as a bus.
Right.
You know, Jessica was telling us she lived, past tense, in the Brickell area, which is sort of a microcosm, best test case for mass transit. Dense, small, getting out of that area is a half-an-hour prospect, even to get on a highway.
If you're using your car to get out of Brickell in the morning, it is painful. I mean, with the bridge traffic, with the Brickell Key traffic, with all the new construction, it is untenable to, you know, to get to work on time or to have a meeting. I mean, you have to plan. I mean, moving 5 blocks could take you 30, 45 minutes. It's an unknown.
So then getting any kind of mass transit in place, to your point, Doug, can't be in the traffic that's got lights and traffic and congestion. It's got to be a rail or a corridor or a bow, whatever it is, with its own designated speed lanes.
Right, and that really is what the mayor has proposed, and that is what's known as bus rapid transit, which really is, it's obviously not rail, but it acts somewhat like rail in that you have the vehicles designed to interact with stations where you can buy the tickets in advance, and everyone board as a group like you do on a train. It's express stops and designated roadways. They've proposed 7 overpasses in the South Dade Transitway. It was renamed the Transitway from the Busway because mayors were so furious at the idea of bus rapid transit on this road that they said, we'll go along with a certain grant application, but you have to take bus out of the name of this road. I mean, this is how unpopular the notion of buses, by the way, the most popular by far mode of public transportation in the county. That's how unpopular it is to elected officials.
And that's why this is going to be looked at with skepticism, because we took bus out of the name of the South Dade Busway, but we have buses that are still there. I have to stop for them every day I go home. Right. So people are going to say, you're taking the name out, but isn't this a bus, what do you say, a bus 2.0?
You know, we didn't really get to speak about with the mayor was just the politicization of what is going on with the SMART plan, because you have 13 commissioners who represent different districts, north to south, in a very big county. And everybody wants to be first. Right. And everyone, I mean, to their point, has constituents sitting in traffic. So how do you get around those politics?
Well, I mean, I think it's really important to look at where are the needs and where can we teach people to take public transportation. I understand that the Northwest Corridor was promised, but we have to look about how do we get people to get out of their cars and into public transportation. I think it starts when you're young. I think it's very important to get people in the operating that muscle of public transportation. I think it starts in college. I think it's it should be a priority to connect FIU immediately. That should be the very first line that's done. It'll take about 40,000 people off the road potentially. There's 40,000 students and instructors and professors that work there every day. We need to take advantage of that. Young people cannot afford the increasing costs of insurance, of new cars.
Right.
And it's
young
time.
Professionals like yourself who live in the Brickell area use the Metro Mover, and they want to live someplace, may not even want a car.
But that may be true.
And then they Uber wherever they want to go.
The mayor can't say that the promises were made by somebody else. A promise that's made by the county is the county's promise, and it doesn't matter who the mayor or the commissioners are. I can tell you, if the Northwest Corridor is not a part of the first extension, don't even think about going to the black community for any money for transportation in our lifetime.
Doug, what's next?
Well, I think that's the key point, is that when can you go to the public and ask for more money for public transportation? Because part of the mayor's pitch was a 40-year financial forecast that shows no money. I mean, they don't have the money, according to their numbers, it's questionable whether or not they could even operate another rail line, even if the federal government essentially paid for it. So, one plan, you talk about east-west, Chairman Steve Bovo, considered a likely candidate for mayor in 2020, he had, before the SMART plan, he was pitching, let's do east-west on existing cargo lines. And he essentially said it was, listen, let's do one line, let's show the public we can do it, and then we will be in a better position to ask the public to raise the transportation tax.
Right, another half penny. All right, well, let me just say for the record that next Sunday we are going to have the mayor of Broward County to come on and some other representatives to talk about mass transit in Broward, which is just as important. All right, hold your thoughts. We'll be back with more Roundtable in just a minute.
We are back with the Roundtable, turning now to healthcare, national subject, stuck right now in the Senate. The doors closing. Jessica, on what is a Republican plan to repeal and replace, or just repeal. And you heard earlier Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz calling for, as Democrats have, a more bipartisan look at healthcare. Where is that going?
Look, I mean, I think it's really important that we debate this, because this is a sixth of the economy that we're talking about. We're talking about people's health. So we need to really come up with a solution. And I think this is healthy that there's debate, that there's, they're trying to work out a deal. I think that it is important to come up with a plan that is going to be backed and is not going to be repealed by another party, for example, in the next 7 years. So we need to come up with something that's sustainable, because we see in many states, there are hardly any providers left that are providing Obamacare, health services. So we really need to kind of get this under wraps. And I think it's crucial for the Republicans to get this win. If they don't get this win, I think it's going to be very detrimental in 2018.
Why is it a win rather than a win for the American people?
Right. Well, right now, people are looking at Obamacare, which has its flaws and definitely needs to be mended, in my opinion, and not ended. It's a lifesaver for people with pre-existing conditions. Parents like me are happy that we can keep our children on to 26. The Medicaid provision is absolutely wonderful. And on the other side, they're looking at what I call the Trump doesn't care, where they take $700 billion out of Medicaid to give to rich people, where people with pre-existing conditions either will not have coverage or the coverage will be too much to afford. Look, right now, let's be realistic. It's too toxic among the Republicans and Democrats for us to realistically believe there's going to be a bipartisan bill, because the fundamentals of the Democratic approach, the Republicans oppose, and the fundamentals of the Republican approach, the Democrats oppose. They both believe in what they're doing. I see no way they're going to have a middle.
Yeah, but Doug, we heard President Trump say a couple of times this week, he said several things about health care. One of the things he said is, we Republicans, I don't own this failure, he meant, and we don't own this. But in fact, you've got a Republican-controlled Congress, you've got a Republican president. For 7 years, they've been saying repeal, replace. They said it on the campaign trail. Now they didn't do it. I mean, what is there to do other than sit down with Democrats and try and mend the ACA?
Well, one plan is just to repeal the legislation, which I guess the Senate is considering. There hasn't been a hearing on what's being voted on. Do we even know what would be voted on next week? I mean, Obamacare,
The bill is a mystery.
That certainly followed an extensive, detailed debate, the passage of the Affordable Care Act. We certainly haven't had that this time around, right? There hasn't been a single hearing. So it's going to be interesting to see what is owned if something passes the Congress and is signed by the president. Certainly the Republicans will own every ounce of it.
Yeah. You know, before we let time slip away, I think we really need to take a moment and say a fond farewell to Sean Spicer, the press secretary for the president, who resigned this week because, well, I guess his stated reason was because he did not favor the hiring of communications director Anthony Scaramucci. But I have to say, this man made those mundane, droll daily press briefings must-see TV. I'm going to miss him.
I mean, I think people might miss him, but I think for the president and for the White House, it's important to have a communicator who is not part of the story, who is the actual, just the voice, the press secretary, and just sticks to that job. I think just in the couple of days that we've seen Anthony Scaramucci, do his job, introduce himself. I think he has, he's kind of given the confidence to a lot of, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but a lot of confidence to journalists that he will be speaking with them, that there will be a lot more regular contact, and it's not going to be an adversarial position. So I certainly think that that's going to be beneficial to the president's agenda.
Well, for sure, Saturday Night Live is in mourning, along with the late night.
I was hoping they would invite him.
Yeah, absolutely.
They might.
But let's
Stephen Colbert has got tears in his eyes.
Absolutely. Let's
over
be
losing
realistic.
Spicer.
This is an impossible job.
Yeah.
The president is saying things that are not true, and then the press secretary has got to go out and spin it and make it resemble something that is true and try to force feed it to the public and to the press. I mean, I heard someone the other day said, the press secretary, whoever it is, has been turned into a prevaricating puppet. I don't want to go that far, but this is not a job I would take. Remember this one thing too. Who was the acting director of the communications before the appointment of Scaramucci? It was Spicer.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say.
So Spicer assumed he would get the position. And now the president brings in someone who has no experience with the press and makes him Spicer's boss. Spicer said, that's a bridge too far.
The White House Communications Office is so in disarray that this week, after the president gave that interview to the New York Times, everybody had to listen to the tape immediately so they were on the same page as the president. They had no idea what he was going to say. And then they had to repeat it and defend it. But Mr. Scaramucci, Doug, this is a smart guy, but he is a Goldman Sachs banker, Harvard Law graduate. He had no experience at all in politics or government, really.
Same with the boss.
I was just going to say that.
And he's cut out of the same cloth as the boss.
And can I
New
just
York
say,
smooth.
In his first press briefing, he used the words arbitrage spread. Everybody went to look that up. What does that even mean? All right, thanks so much. Great roundtable.
Great roundtable. Thank you.
Up next, we have seen the best and worst of human nature side by side this week. A what would you do moment coming up next.